Hello and welcome to the Creative Couch. I'm Sam Marshall, artist and creative coach. This is a podcast about creativity, confidence, and living a creative life. Hello and welcome to the second ever Creative Couch podcast. We are here this lovely Sunday afternoon. The sun is shining. It feels almost spring-like. I've got a sketch club coming up in 3/4 of an hour, so I thought I'd squeeze this in before that happens. So I'm hoping I can get it all done in the time that we have. Thank you to everybody who has already said how much they've enjoyed the podcast, and thank you to everybody who sent in dilemmas this past week. It's been wonderful to read through your queries and your questions. So today we are answering Marianne. I always get that wrong. Sorry, Marianne's question. We're also answering Liza's question, and we are answering Melissa's question. So we've got a lovely range of questions to dig deep into today. So as always, I say as always, as if this podcast has been going for years. It's only been going for 1 week. But the structure of how I am answering these dilemmas is I'm going to give you a summary of the dilemma that the person has sent in, the creative has sent in. I'm then going to unpack it. So we're going to look at the emotional layer underneath that dilemma. We're going to look at the practical layer. And then I'm going to summarize it again, and then I'm going to give homework. So that's how the structure kind of works, so that you guys all know what to expect. Okay, so interestingly enough, this question or dilemma that Mary Ann posed and sent in is something that I've heard a few times, most recently. In fact, I had a session with one of my creatives, Shasta, last week. Hi, Shasta. Shout out to Shasta, who lives in the US. And she had a pretty similar dilemma as Mary Ann has. And I think that those of you who live in the US, actually, wherever you live, really, the world is chaotic. The political climate is unnerving, to say the least. And it obviously has an impact on us and our daily life. So Mary Ann's question is really around all of that. So I'm going to start off with reading what she wrote to me. She said, "Hello, my friend. I love to hear you speak on how to stay motivated and creative when the world feels like it's tumbling down around you. My art practice is suffering right now due to all the political changes going on in the US. Maybe another way of looking at it is how not to let staying informed politically take over your ability to be creative." So it's quite a heavy one to start off with. And I think we need to normalize this a bit for a start, because when the world feels unstable, motivation drops. It's inevitable. You know, I mean, if you're like me, I have the news on all the time. I have Radio 4 on all the time. I'm listening to the news, and, you know, you sort of feel powerless. You feel powerless because it seeps into every area of your life. It's very hard not to let what's going on in the world affect you. And the thing is, constant exposure to crisis keeps the nervous system in this kind of vigilant mode. So I think what's Mary Ann is dealing with here is overwhelm and nervous system fatigue, really. And I think the thing is, it's really common, it's really human. And I think that accepting it and just kind of knowing that's how you feel is the first step to kind of combating it in some way. Because I think that this is a dilemma, this is a problem, but there are ways, I think, that we can go about changing it and making sure that that stays outside of our creative space. Because motivation is unreliable, but commitment is the thing that keeps you steady. So what I'm going to advise here for Mary Ann is that she really looks at her studio as her sanctuary. So Marianne is a printmaker, but like I said, based in the US, and she does these beautiful prints, lino cut prints of her cats. And Marianne's got a lovely, lovely setup. Her cats are in her studio, and it's a beautiful space. So I think what my first bit of advice for is that keep your studio as your sanctuary. Keep it as your safe space. I've written lots of notes, so I'm just going to turn the page. Um, you're in control of your studio. What goes on in your studio, you're in control of. You're not in control of the outside world, but in your studio, you are in control of this. So I think what I'd like you to try, Marianne, is for 7 days, you create a boundary so that there's no news before you go into the studio. You don't digest any news. You don't get up and scroll your phone or listen to the news. You turn that off. So for 7 days, I'm going to kind of give you a news fast. So no political podcasts while you're working. I don't know if that's something that you listen to, but turn off the radio, no scrolling on your phone between printing. Just keep that space in your studio as your safe space without any influence from the outside world. It becomes a protected zone. That's kind of how I'd like to think about it. Because you're not ignoring the world. You're not ignoring the world here. You're just making sure that your nervous system has some kind of relief in order for you to be able to get on with your work. And I think another way I've thought about how you could do this, and I think that this might resonate with you because I know that there's a lot of your work has got a calmness to it. It has got a sense of tranquility. So I think maybe making a piece of work that has that intention. So almost making that stability visible. So I think thinking about what grounding looks like in a visual language, maybe it's the repetition, it's symmetry, it's a limited palette, which I think all of that kind of relates to your work, Marianne. Stillness, maybe creating a piece that has that idea of trying to create stability with that purpose might help. So you're kind of, again, taking control. So when the world feels chaotic, you create some order within your actual work. So maybe making a piece that has that intention, I think might be really, really helpful for you. And also, one question I'd really like to ask you would be if you stopped making your work now, what would you lose about yourself? Because I think if we because I think almost what's happening here is Marianne is going to extremes. It's almost like she's thinking that, she's not going to make any more work, that maybe her work is, there's this block, there's this influence from the outside world. And there's become this kind of almost, sort of inability to keep going. And I think, but actually looking at what it would look like if you did stop making work, what would that mean? How would that affect you? What part of you would you lose? So I think having that question in mind is always, I always think that to myself. It's like I met a big group of my family yesterday, and one of my cousin's sons turned around and asked me, so what else do what else do you do apart from your work? I'm like, uh, I didn't really have an answer because it's what I do. I can't. I don't really. I said to him, I go shopping in Waitrose. I go running with my dog, but even then, I'm listening to Japanese podcasts. I mean, well, I mean, I guess Japanese is something other, but I think that's that thing, isn't it? What part of you would you lose? I mean, if I stopped making work, then I don't know, I'd be a little tiny shriveled up thing. Anyway, I think it's a quite nice, it's an interesting question to ask yourself. So I hope that helps, Marianne. So it's not about ignoring politics. It's not about pretending everything's fine. It's just about reminding yourself that creativity needs psychological safety. And I think your practice can become your anchor. You don't have to feel motivated to begin. You just need a protected space where motivation can be allowed to happen. So I think if you kind of maybe stick to that. So this is your homework. So complete the 7-day news boundary experiment, like I suggested. create one piece of work that has the idea of stability or grounding. And again, I think that's going to be quite easy for you because again, like your images are very still, they're very beautiful. But I think if you intentionally create a piece when you're thinking about that, that might kind of, I think that might help. And then reflect on that identity question. If I stop making work right now, what part of me would I lose? So I hope that's helpful, Marianne. Um, I think a lot of us are feeling that way at the moment. And I know that when I'm feeling really heavy with things, doing something repetitive for me, like printing an edition or something like that really helps. Or, going into my studio space and just having no sound on at all. And I'm just listening to the birds and I can hear Marple snoring, all those kind of things I think are really grounding. So anyway, I hope that helps. Hope that gives you some things to crack on with. Right, moving on. So we're moving from the US to the Highlands of Scotland. So we're going to answer Liza's question. So Liza is a creative that I work with. Liza is actually from South Africa, relocated to Scotland, Isle of Skye. I think I'm going to say about 20 years ago. I might be wrong, but I might have got my times wrong. But so Liza lives in the Isle of Skye with her husband, and Liza's got a flourishing practice going on, lots of different ways of working, painting, sort of collage, mixed media. And Liza's put this question to me about selling older work. So she said she's got a stash of older work that no longer fits her practice. It's mostly on paper, and at the moment it's sitting in a box underneath her bed. She's considering selling it cheaply or on Instagram or on her website, but she's also thought about giving it away or cutting it up for collage. So her question is, if I price it cheaply, will it diminish the value of my current work? And how will that look publicly? And she said, in the worst case, she appears desperate. In the best case, she clears space and makes some money. Okay. So I think I want to kind of dig into the emotional layer behind all of this, behind this question, because I gently want to ask, what is all of this about? Is it about space? Is it about money? Or is it about seeing what happens when you put the work out there? Because that's the key thing here. Because I think if the answer is, well, if Liza held the sale and nothing sold, how would she feel? How would you feel, Liza? How would you feel? Would you think, oh, okay, well, I gave it a go. I'm just going to give it away and collage it? Or would you feel disappointed, feel a little bit rejected, and feel like you actually were looking for the validation? Because if it is that latter one, then I think there's a slight danger there in that I don't think a sale should ever be a referendum on your worth as an artist. So I think, answering that first question is where I want to start at this point. Okay. Now, if it is, I just want to give it a go. And actually, if it doesn't sell, I'm just going to collage it, give it up. Or, as I'm doing this week, I've got a big pile of rubbish in the garden because I'm clearing out my garage. It's all going. It's going. Not my artwork. Well, I don't know. I might be dropping a few things in the bin. But anyway, let's move on to the practical layer. So I think selling older work cheaply doesn't automatically diminish the value of your current work. I think confusion diminishes value, not sort of price. So my advice here would be to make it an event, not a permanent sale section. So I think I think things like Super Seconds, which I'm involved in, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, it happens twice a year. It's a weekend. I think that's really healthy because it creates that idea that for just though that small amount of time you're offering work at a reduced rate. So it's a time limit, it's a clear beginning and an end. And I think you need to frame it clearly as a studio archive sale or making space for new work or something like that. And then it's important that ends and that sale is removed from your website or for your Instagram. I think that's the best way to do it. I think this container kind of keeps the hierarchy intact. So I think that's the best way to do it. So I think the dilemma looks like it's about pricing and perception, but actually underneath it's about intention. So I think, absolutely go ahead and do it, but be cautious of why you're doing it. If you're doing it because you kind of whether there is underneath that's that wanting of people to like your work and buy your work, but if you don't buy it, if people don't buy it, then it could make you feel not great. So all of that kind of stuff comes into the mix, doesn't it? So I think it's important to look at the emotional layer behind that question before we go ahead with the practical stuff. So by all means, go ahead and do it. I mean, I think opening a sale, having a sale and going in with a spirit of fun just to kind of see is always quite interesting. I'm always really excited to open my doors for Super Seconds because, I'm always really interested to see what sells. And for me, if not that much sells, which is quite rare, but if not that much sells, it's great because I don't have much stuff to pack up because packing for stuff, it can take up a long time. So I think absolutely go ahead and do it, but keep those boundaries in place. Do it for a time limit, specify when it's going to start, when it's going to end, and frame it clearly as a studio sale, studio archive sale, old work going, new work coming in, and then move on from there. So great question. So homework, write down your real motivation for doing this, answer truthfully, how would you feel if nothing sold, and then go ahead and kind of plan the sale with those clear boundaries. Hope that helps, Liza. Okay, on to the last one. How are we doing for time? We're doing fine. I think I'm going to finish in time for my sketch club. We're doing Andalusian. Well, it's inspired by my trip to Spain a couple of weeks ago. That's what we're drawing in sketch club today. And yeah, just to remind you, if anybody wants to join me every month for 2 hours of gentle drawing, then do join me in my sketch club. Lovely bunch of ladies, all ladies, come along and we just draw for a couple of hours. You don't have to share your work. In fact, I don't ask anybody to share their work. It's it's a lovely sort of communal activity, but there's no sharing. There's no sharing, no comparing. It's just, yeah. Anyway, moving on. Right, Melissa. So Melissa's got an interesting dilemma. She says, I've just seen your post on Instagram and have some questions that have been whirling around. I've been working on textiles and been struggling how to present work. There seems to be so many options that it puts my mind in a spin. I'm also about to exhibit some work, but I'm inexperienced to feel out of my depth. How do I curate my work? Should it all be theme connected? Should mounting, framing, hanging be uniform? So great question, Melissa. Really great question. So I think underneath all of this again is about confidence and authority. So, well, let's look at the emotional layer before we dig into the practical layer, because I think that you're feeling out of your depth. But I have to say, I think that's a really good thing. It means you're stepping up. It means that you're out of your depth. You've never done this before, but you're setting the intention. You've said you're going to put this show on. You've set the intention. You're out of your depth. You're reaching out for help, which is great. But I don't think you're confused because you're incapable. You're confused because you care. It's important to you that you do this properly and you do this in the best of your abilities. And I think I agree, textiles can be overwhelming. There's so many different presentation options. Do you frame it? Do you hang it? Do you mount it? Do you hang it raw? Do you stitch it to something, put it under glass, no glass, etc.? And I think that choice almost creates paralysis. So I hear you on that one, but I've got some gentle suggestions for you. And I think the thing is curating isn't about rules. It's about making decisions. That's what it's about. And you are entirely capable of making those decisions with just a little bit of stepping back and getting your head around everything. So my first suggestion would be put it all out, get it all out. If you've got a big space somewhere, I mean, maybe, I don't know. I mean, I've done it whereby I've laid all my work. If it's been a lovely day, I've laid it all out in the garden, or just some big space where you can get all the work out and you can see it. You can see it as it is. And then ask yourself, what is speaking to what? This is just in terms of how you put it together. What is speaking to what feels connected, and maybe almost what feels like a different conversation. So just have a look at those. And then you edit, you take out stuff that feels, you will know that you'll see similarities in things, and you will know that they're outliers, the things that actually, you know what, that's just really random. That doesn't need to be in this exhibition or this show. Take it out. That goes. So you're editing. So you're looking, you're assessing, you're editing. So I think the less is always stronger. Don't ram it full of stuff. Just, even if you've got, I don't know, 7 pieces on the floor, and actually you just show 3. Great. Great. Editing always makes it stronger, in my opinion. So that's, especially when you're exhibiting work, especially when you're showing work. I mean, things like open studios, I mean, I just ram stuff in because it's, it's an open studio. I'm trying to show as much work as I can. I'm not necessarily curating my space. So it depends on where it is that you're showing. But from what I can see, you're having an exhibition in a space. So, thinking about what works with what. And I think you asked the question whether it needs to be theme connected. So I don't think it necessarily needs to have identical subject matter, but there needs to be something that is connecting it. So it could be, a mood, a language, a kind of color. There's something is threading through all of the pieces that link it together. But it doesn't have to be still life or, I don't know, landscape or whatever. I mean, as long as it has some cohesion, which I think it will, because it's from you. And I always think that there is a an undercurrent of you throughout all of your work. But I think a good question to ask, and I think this is I remember this, somebody asked me this when I was putting together a show, and I was struggling with putting together some work, and she said, well, what story are you trying to say here? What story are you trying to tell here, Sam? And I think that's a good question for you here, Melissa. It's like, what story am I telling here? It doesn't need to be grand. It could just be really simple. But that might be a good question to ask yourself. Okay, moving on. So should mounting and framing be uniform? Well, if I'm being honest, I think consistency looks more considered. So if I was having an exhibition of my prints, I would make sure that pretty much all of my prints were in the same frame. There's that all oak frames or all grey. I know I like grey frames. So I think that's important because that will then make it appear a body of work. But I mean, again, so if you're hanging stuff, then yeah. I mean, if you've got, I mean, with textiles, it's different. So if you've got some stuff that's behind glass, then yeah, absolutely hang that on the wall, and then maybe you could have some stuff which is pinned to the wall. I don't think that matters, but I think if everything's framed and then you're using different frames, then that can look a bit higgledy-piggledy, unless that's part of the work itself. Unless that's part of the work itself. But again, we've got to consider cost here. Frames are expensive. With textiles, it's much easier just to kind of pin it to the wall, or I don't know, maybe have it hanging over something, or however you choose to display it. But uniformity always creates calm for the viewer, and I think it helps them see the work rather than having to battle how it's presented. You present it clearly, confidently, and you've edited it well, then I think you're on for a winner. And then you've obviously got to think about the space. So how large is it? How many walls are there? What color walls are there? Is it a good wall? Because often I've been to shows and, the wall's been terrible. It's been bits are hanging off, there's chipboard and all sorts going on. So, so making sure that what the quality of the wall that you're hanging on is. I mean, will it be able to support textile stuff? All of this is important. Again, I don't know what's happening with your show. I'm just kind of throwing some ideas out here. And I will always say resist the temptation to, fill every inch. I'm going back to what I said earlier. So inexperience doesn't show in simple decisions. Keep things simple, and that looks more that looks more confident. That's what I always say. It's a bit like when you go into a shop and you've got, a beautiful rail of clothes, and all the clothes are like, spaced out nicely. You automatically think expensive. And there's just something, look, they look delicious. They've got space to breathe. And, you know, I always try and think about that in my wardrobe, although I very, very rarely get there because as soon as I've cleared out my wardrobe, I've ordered something else in. However, you know what I mean. You know, you walk into a store and there's that kind of sense that, okay, there's a sense of structure here. You know, every single piece is considered. So, I mean, think about that. Clear, calm, and consistent is what I wrote down here. Okay, so your homework, Melissa. Number one, remove 20% of the work immediately. So edit, get rid of stuff. Stuff will be there that doesn't necessarily need to be there. Write one paragraph. This body of work explores. So that goes back to the theme. Goes back to not necessarily having a theme, but having something that links it together. And then I would say choose one presentation rule and apply it across the show. I mean, I do think though, if you have got frame stuff and then you are going to hang stuff on the wall, that's fine. You know, I think, but I guess I'm just meaning, you know, don't just go with a crazy red frame and then a pink frame. And do you know what I mean? Kind of keep that consistent. And then also sketch the wall layout before installing. When I was teaching and we had to, with all the students, part of their final major project was always to kind of do some detailed sketches of how their final pieces are going to work on the wall. So I think having a little mock-up of how it's going to look would be really helpful. And you can probably do that kind of thing on the computer now. I'm sure you can. It's super simple. I mean, I'm not great on the computer, so well, I'm saying that I'm running a podcast, I'm doing YouTube. I'm pretty okay at the computer, but design things, I'm not there yet. And I don't have time to add that to my list. Anyway, moving on. So I hope that's helpful. Melissa. Sounds exciting. I wish you all the best of that with your exhibition. Just take a step back and think, you know, I'm doing this, and you are going to do it. You're just gonna keep breathing, looking, assessing, and keeping, you know, you've got this in hand. You just need to edit, think, plan, and execute. Okay, I think that's about another half an hour. So thank you for joining me today on Sam's Creative Couch, or The Creative Couch with Sam Marshall and Marple. Those of you who are wondering if she's here. Those of you who are on audio can't see her, but those of you who are watching on YouTube can see her, looking beautiful. So as always, thank you for joining me. Again, I say it as if I've been doing this for years, but I feel like I've been talking to you guys on Instagram for years. I have. So if you're joining me from Instagram, you're very welcome here. And as I will say from now until this podcast finishes, which hopefully won't be for many years, if you could rate, review it, or whatever, however you're listening to it. If you're listening to it on YouTube, send me, I don't know, like it, make a comment. Listening to it on Spotify or Apple, leave a review. It all helps. And of course, if you've got a creative dilemma, then please send them in, because I'm steaming through them. I'm getting through them. So I will need some more very soon. So if you've got anything you'd like to ask me about creativity in general, send it through to thecreativecouchpod@gmail.com. And I will add it to the list. I won't respond to you individually, but rest assured I will read them and I will answer them. Okay, guys, thanks for joining me, and I will see you back here next week.